Welcome, my guildlings, to another spooktacular episode of Help for the Guildless. My name is Cole Spire, and I will be leading you through the hallowed and haunted halls of this dilapidated and broken down insane asylum known as geek culture. Happy October, everyone! Why is this month a call to celebration? Well, that's because what happens at the end of this fall month. All Hallows Eve, or as it's better known, Halloween. This happens to be my absolute favorite holiday, and with good reason. I love getting scared. Actually, most people love being scared, and that's why Halloween has become such a favorite pastime for the masses. Children love it because they get to dress like their favorite heroes or monsters and walk home with a haul of delectable treats that will sustain a sugar high for the next month until the looming specter of Christmas shows up. Teens and young adults love it because it allows them to dress how they wish, all under the guise of expression. Even if most of the time that expression is how slutty they can dress or what new costume reveals the most skin available without being illegal. For the males on that side of the coin, it's the equivalent of how much they can drink without getting too much alcohol poisoning so they can bag the girl in the slutty pumpkin costume. What does it mean for geeks, though? Well, we do dress up. But it's no different for us than a cosplay at a convention. Halloween holds a different special symbolism for geeks, and that would be horror movies. That's right, one of the oldest genres of movies, along with adventure movies and romance. Horror movies are a way for the public at large to release their disbelief and gasp along with the heroine on screen as she runs from the creature of the week. Horror movies were always tantalizing and titillating. It was one of the only genres of film that affects every moviegoer the same. It grasps something deep within our core and triggers a rush of adrenaline, and our brain screams for us to flee from the monster on screen, even though we know it's not really there. So in 2015, I am glad to confidently exclaim that horror movies have died. Now, before you jump at me to proclaim that horror is alive and well because of movies like Insidious 2, the Poltergeist remake, Krampus, Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension, and the amazing new story Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse, think about that. Think about what you just announced to try and defend a dead genre that hasn't been relevant since the 90s. A sequel to a bad possession movie. A remake that bombed harder than a nuke dropped from space. A movie based on the folklore of Santa Claus's evil twin. Another movie that'll be 75 minutes of found footage and lame scare tricks like cabinet slamming closed, followed up by 15 minutes of jump scares. And another addition to the comedy zombie feature that is meant to entertain more than scare. You really want to defend that? Where are the real horror movies? The ones made to scare us and keep us scared for weeks. Movies like the original Poltergeist and The Exorcist, Night of the Living Dead, Jaws, Dracula, American Werewolf in Paris, Alien, The Ring, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Funny story about the Exorcist, the original Exorcist. My mom, as a child, wanted to see it. Her mother, my grandmother, told her, "You are forbidden to see that movie." So, like any rambunctious teenager, she decided she was going to do what they always do and find a way to do what they want to do when they're being told they can't do it. They get told to not do the thing, so what do? They go do the thing. So she decided she was going to go have a sleepover at her friend's house. Her friend's mother had no qualms about letting these girls go see this movie. At that time, there wasn't that much restriction on who can go see movies. although this was a rated R movie. So her friend's mother bought the tickets for them and let them go see it. They enjoyed the movie, it scared the crap out of them, and then they went and had their sleepover. As they were talking about the movie and how horrible it really would be to be possessed by the devil, the girl's bed fell apart, crashed to the ground, and my mom and her friend freaked the fuck out, screaming about they were now possessed and how they were horrible for going to do what they were told not to. My mom went home to my grandmother and told her she was sorry that the devil has possessed her because she went to go see this movie. Now, my grandmother laughed it off, of course, but my mom did get in trouble. But where were movies like that now? Unfortunately, they have gone the way of the dodo. October is known as the month that is full of scary. 31 days, the most terrifying moments that have been held through history, caught on film. Television stations have lists of 31 Days of Terror, or the 13 Nights of Halloween, depending on the station, where they show the horror movies that we, as geeks and movie lovers, have come to enjoy and love. Out of those lists, though, how many of those movies were made after the year 2000? Maybe 1 or 2? That's a horrible ratio. 1 out of 2 of 31? Or even 1 out of 2 out of 13. Holy crap. That's bad. Bad for our generation. And the current generation. And future generations. The horror genre has been resting on its laurels with classics like I listed before. I'm not going to talk about slasher flicks here, because even though the first movies of each franchise was made to be scary, what I'm talking about is Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, even Child's Play if you want to go that far. They were made to be scary, and most of them were, which is why they got sequels. But after multiple sequels and countless bad movies, a slasher flick has been morphed into what it is today. A campy, fun gore fest that is about more shock value rather than real horror and fright. I mean, okay, let's talk about a really, really good one that can't be part of this discussion, and that's Cabin in the Woods. Now, Cabin in the Woods was innovative and also broke the mold of what a slasher flick could be. Yet, it is still exactly what it is, a slasher flick. You have the set amount of teenagers, or in this case, college students. They each have their own archetypes, and a monster is coming to get them. It's still a slasher flick. It's a good one. It does have scary, but it's more gore, and there's comedy and sex, and it's there. I also really can't talk about movies like Saw or Tarista's Go Home, because these are more like torture porn than actual horror movies. I mean, they could be considered psychological thrillers more than horror, so again, they still can't be part of this conversation. Even with them, they're still all about gore and shock value. What I'm talking about, of course, are monster movies or creature features. Real horror movies that played on fears of each person and caused them to scream and grab onto their date's arm and give nightmares to kids, which is why we weren't allowed to watch them. I want to compare movies from the past, the monsters of yesteryear, to the abominations we call horror movies today. And I'm not necessarily comparing the movies, especially what I'm going to talk about first. It's comparing the monster of yesteryear to what they are today. So let's start simple. Let's talk about vampires. What do we have nowadays that is considered a vampire movie? Well, the last big vampire push came in the form of Twilight, a debacle of a movie that took the core of what a vampire was and turned it into an abusive and neutered version of itself. I actually read all 4 books in the Twilight series, and let me tell you, it was a goddamn chore. I almost fell asleep while reading the teen angst-ridden second book, New Moon. It was all drivel, and in the context of a vampire film, Twilight cemented itself as the new pop culture king of what a vampire should be. Are you kidding me? Edward Cullen is praised by the teens and tweens as being the perfect boyfriend. He has a mom fan base. He is everything the underdeveloped teens and tweens' emotional and hearts could want, and he's adorable and cute and honest and devoted, which is what all the mothers want. An emotionally abusive sociopath, emotionless lump of flesh. Remember everything you can about Edward Cullen, and then I want you to compare that to Dracula, whether it's Judas, Vlad Dracul, Vlad Tepes, or any other incarnation of him. Dracula knew he was an apex predator, but even knowing this, when he fell for a woman, he wooed her, attempted to seduce her, and wanted her to love him. And when it got that far, what did Dracula do? Married her. Turned her into one of the vampires, and married her. I'm not going to talk about who's the better boyfriend. Even with Dracula being romanticized, he was still a monster, and he knew it. He turned into different creatures like a wolf or bats and fog, and he was feared because the humans realized that they were so vulnerable to the vampire. He was stronger, he was faster, he was alive longer, so he was more cunning. They realized he was a threat. Vampires are based in folklore from all over the world, each one having their own weaknesses and own prey. Each story was told as a cautionary tale about the unknown. These monsters were terrifying. And each nation, each continent has a creation of a vampire, an incarnation of what a vampire is. And there are different types. But because of Twilight and the uproar it caused, anytime a movie is made where they may make the vampire the monster it's supposed to be, it gets panned. Fright Night, for example, the remake, is a perfect comparison to that. The remake of Fright Night made the vampire what it was supposed to be, a vicious killing machine that had an insatiable bloodlust. It even has a line in it that he's not Edward Cullen, he's not the romantic boyfriend, he's the shark from Jaws. It was a very entertaining story, and the vampire was definitely scary, but it was booed out of theaters because the vampire wasn't Edward. Not convinced yet? Alright, let's talk about werewolves. I have to, yet again, thank Twilight for this, because of Jacob and his pack. Stephanie Meyers has almost single-handed destroyed 2 versions of movie monsters and classic versions. Jacob is in control of his change. He could never hurt Bella or harm a human. He is there specifically to protect the human race from vampires. Yes, I know at the end of the books you find out Jacob isn't really a vampire or a werewolf. He's actually a shapeshifter. For all intents and purposes, for this entire story, he was being called a werewolf. So we're going with that. And anyone who wants to debate that can talk to me in the comments. Now, even in Van Helsing, the werewolf is shown to be a merciless beast, unable to control its urges. Hell, even Harry Potter gets it right. Of course, those 2 movies are not of the horror genre, but what does that say for the scary movie? It tells you that it's gone belly up. The werewolf has taken the silver bullet to the head and it has exploded. Compare Jacob to the remake of The Wolfman. The Wolfman was an amazing movie. It treated the werewolf like the beast that it is supposed to be, and in a school paper, a girl said that it was a horrible movie because they ripped off Stephanie Meyer, that werewolves aren't mean and scary as the movie portrayed. ripped off? Jesus Christ. This is what is filling the heads of the younger generation we have now. Nothing came before Stephenie Meyer and Jacob and his pack. The werewolf is nothing more than a giant puppy dog. American Werewolf in Paris was not only an amazing werewolf movie, but the last good one, besides The Wolfman. The last good one besides The Wolfman was Cursed. It stars Christina Ricci, however you want to pronounce her name, and is worth the watch. It treats the werewolf like it's supposed to be. Scary. A predator that once was human but has no remorse and no humanity that can be reasoned with. It's so brutal that the only purest of silver can actually hurt or kill it. Just like in the stories of old, the folklore that these creatures came from. The mark of the beast was not something to be praised. Lycanthropy is a real disease. And guess what? It's horrible. I could go on, but let's talk about everyone's favorite new monster. Even though they're nowhere near new. Zombies. I hate zombies with a fiery passion. I hate them. But I can still take this seriously. And the whole podcast idea for this started with something I saw at work. And I had to call Wendy to talk to her about it. It's something that triggered a rage in me that made me want to scream. A California lottery scratcher called Zombies Return. Zombies Return. That means this is the second version of this scratcher. Zombies do not belong on scratchers. Zombies are vicious, vile, decaying, flesh-eating, brain-devouring, evil creatures that look at humanity as a walking buffet. They are a giant virus that caused the end of the world. They're not supposed to win you money. These things have jumped so far over the shark that they should be doused in glitter and sent out to sparkle in the daylight. We have iZombie, where she is a beautiful undead superhero. Not scary. Then there was Warm Bodies, which was a romance story with zombies, where the normal zombies weren't the real terror, it was the things underneath the skin of the undead, if they fully gave in to their base nature, that was the scary thing. Let's talk about Scout's Guide. This is a college comedy with zombies in it for gore factor. I know some of you are going to bring up The Walking Dead. Listen, The Walking Dead is not a zombie show. It's a character piece that focuses on how people, alive people, are dealing with the zombie apocalypse, with a lot of walking, and sometimes the zombies show up. The real monsters on the show are not the disease-ridden corpses, it's the humans that are still alive. We can't even rely on the godfather of zombies, George Romero, for a good zombie movie anymore, because the last two of his series sucked. They were turned into action movies. The same with Resident Evil, a survival horror game turned movie that had the perfect premise for a zombie movie, turned into an action flick after the first one. Zombies have strayed so far from what they are. And like I said before, I hate zombies. I hate talking about zombies. And I hate what they have become more. The last real zombie movie was Zombieland. And yeah, it did have comedy in it. But it was not a comedy movie with zombies in it. It was a horror movie with levity to create a sense of relief that set up for the next big scare. It was terrifying, and it showed the impact of what could happen to the mentality of the normal people after they had seen some of the most horrifying things happen to the people they knew and loved. Now, I could also include World War Z in on this. It showed something that few movies like this do. It showed the beginning. It showed how bad it could get and how fast it could get that way. It was scary, and it did what it was supposed to do. But Cole, Paranormal Activity revitalized the horror ghost story. I can hear you shout it at me through the screen. And I say, nay. Paranormal Activity is a 90-minute movie of absolutely nothing going on. Not a damn thing. Then during the last 10 to 15 minutes, we get a ton of spooky. The creepiest part of that entire movie, the first one and the second one and anything else, is when the girl got up in a trance, walked over to the opposite side of the bed, and stared at her boyfriend for 3 fucking hours. Why is that scary? Because everybody has felt like they found or that they were being watched when they were asleep. Found footage movies are not scary. I'm not looking forward to the next installment, just like I wasn't looking forward to the second installment of it, or the third, or the fourth, or whatever number we are on. You want to talk found footage? Alright, we'll talk about the first found footage movie. The Blair Witch Project. Why was it scary? Because it was promoted as actual found footage. That this was the final will and testament of 3 people who went looking for this, and that it was going to be played for our base and sick enjoyment in movie theaters across the country. It was shaky, it was dark, it was badly written, and it was horrible. Now, why was it so horrible? Because the conditions that were actually used during the movie were that the director purposefully got his 3 stars and camera crew lost, did not feed them, did not give them proper shelter. That's why they looked as bad as they did. What was the last good ghost story, though? Really, think about it. I'm talking real ghost story, not possession. I'm talking ghost story. What was the last good one? It was the influx of the Japanese horror into the West. The Ring kicked it off, and I don't know a single person that saw that movie who didn't have a hard time falling asleep without staring at their TV for hours, hoping it wouldn't kick on and show snow. No one answered their phone to an unknown number because they were scared of hearing, "You're gonna die in 7 days." Movies like The Grudge caused people to be afraid of houses. Fucking houses! These movies did what they were supposed to do. Keep you on the edge of your seat from the get-go. There was no build-up. There was no story building. The story was told throughout the movie. Paranormal Activity is nothing but fucking anticipation. And so the big scare at the end is what gets you. Anticipation is not horror. Anticipation is, oh my god, something's going to happen, something's going to happen, something's going to happen, something's going to happen. When is it going to happen? It's going to happen now. Do I have to look here? Do I have to look here? I should be looking for something because something I know is going to happen. That's not scary, that's annoying. If, and I have stated this before, if the Five Nights at Freddy's movie goes for the ghost story that it has at its core, and not try to pander to the gameplay and the fans and things like that, there is a really good chance that the movie has a real possibility of being absolutely terrifying and being a real new horror movie. And we also haven't had a great creature feature in a long time. What's a creature feature, you ask? Well, A creature feature is anything that has creatures in it. Jaws is a creature feature. The Blob is a creature feature. Technically, alien movies, yes, are creature features, but it became its own sect of the genre. We haven't had a really good one. The last good one was Slither. It bombed at the box office, and it starred the king of the geek culture, Nathan Fillion. Creature features were the cornerstone of horror at one point. Jaws, Piranha, Tarantula, and Slither are all creature features. Jaws created a fear of the water so great that the great white shark almost went extinct because of overfishing. Hunting a real creature because of the fear brought on by a fictional version of it. That hasn't ever happened again, and hadn't happened before. Jaws is now a joke, though. It's a running gag. And I want you to think about that. Richard Dreyfuss, who starred in Jaws, and I want to say this. If you listen to my Ask Me Anything, you know bad shark movies are a thing for me. They're my favorite guilty pleasure. Jaws is the reason for that. Richard Dreyfuss went to a premiere of this movie because of how horrible it was to make it. He thought it was going to be he thought he was going to never work in Hollywood again. So he went to the premiere. He sat there with people, not production managers, not company people. He sat with people who bought tickets. Watched it with them. They screamed when they were supposed to scream. They gasped when they were supposed to gasp. They laughed when they were supposed to laugh. And they sat and watched in silence when there was nothing going on. He said that when the credits rolled, everyone in the auditorium stood up and applauded, and then sat back down and watched the credits roll, and then stood up and applauded again. That doesn't happen. There's no impact anymore for these movies. Jaws became a joke because of how bad the third and the fourth one went. And the last shark movie that was supposed to take the torch from Jaws was Deep Blue Sea. And it was predictable and just on the wrong side of ridiculous. Except for one part. And I'm sorry, spoiler alert for a 20-year-old movie. Samuel L. Jackson's character gets chomped on out of nowhere. Anybody who says that they saw that coming is lying to you. Nobody saw that coming, and that was the most shocking part of that entire movie. And I brought up aliens a little earlier, and I can bring them up now. Compare the xenomorphs from Alien. And I know it kind of sounds like I've been comparing apples to oranges in a lot of these things, so I'm going to compare apples to apples. The xenomorphs from Alien compared to Prometheus. And if anybody thinks that Prometheus has nothing to do with Alien, has never really seen any of the Alien franchise. Ridley Scott, the creator of Prometheus and the Alien series, went on record to say that the second movie of Prometheus will lead to the first movie of Alien. The aliens in Prometheus, not scary. The situation in Prometheus, not scary. The scientists that they sent, supposed to be the biggest brains in the world to explore a new potential second Earth, were dumb as rocks. I'm an anthrobiologist. I study animals and things like that. I know about space travel and stuff like that. There's an alien snake. I'm going to go touch it. I have designed probes that can give me a 3D layout of an entire mountain in the blink of an eye. And yet I'm lost. I don't know how that happened. Oh, and let's not forget Charlize Theron's character not being able to turn left when running from a falling starship. All of that bad stuff. Then we have Alien. No one in space can hear you scream. This was one creature that terrified people in theaters. And it did the same thing that Jaws did. Don't show the full monster. Jaws did it out of necessity. Ridley Scott did it because he learned. There was atmosphere. There was, yes, anticipation, but not a lot. There was a story to be told. And then there was terror. You felt for these characters. You felt the horror that they were going through, knowing that there was nowhere they could go. So who is to blame for the downfall of this beloved genre? Who? Who is to blame for me getting angry about this? I blame you. I blame the audience. Hear me out. Every person that pays for a ticket that creates a blockbuster movie that causes a new record to be broken has no idea what they want. They'll tell you, I love that movie, but for the next one, I want to change everything about it. That's right. People as a group will applaud the same thing that entertained them for the last 90 minutes to 2 hours, and then want to change everything that caused them to want to buy the ticket in the first place. Now, I want to give an example. Take the Expendables franchise. No, it's not horror. Yes, it is action. But it's a perfect example. Stallone knew what people wanted. Over-the-top action, a lame and unbelievable story, and their action heroes of the 80s and 90s grouped together in 90 minutes of explosions, puns, cockiness, and glorious 80s action. Expendables 2 was the same thing, and was still a success at the box office, even with the audience crying for changes. They wanted a better story, less over-the-top action. They wanted it to be a little bit more believable. What did Stallone do for the third one? Not a damn thing. He kept it exactly as it was supposed to be, how he wrote it. Stallone knew better, and did the same thing for the third movie, and he will continue to do it for the fourth movie that is coming out in a couple of years. Why? Because he knows that the audience doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. Now, look at the indie movie scene. There are successful horror movies. Scary, terrifying, ambiance, everything that they used to be. Why? Because the director is doing what they want to do. Telling the story he or she wants to tell. They're not being pressured by the production company. They're not being pressured by 20th Century Fox to make the audience want to see more. Let's turn this into a new franchise. They're able to do what they want to do. Now, they don't always have the best budget, or they don't always have the best camera work, or the best sound, but that's why they're indie movies. They're independent films. The indie movies are what make me hope for the future. They make me hope that my son and daughter will be able to experience a real horror movie when they get older, like my mother did. Do you want to know what my mom did to introduce me into horror movies? I started getting interested at a young age. because I had some older friends on my cul-de-sac, and the first thing that they wanted me to do was see Nightmare on Elm Street. The way that they sold it to me is it starred Freddy. Now, I'm a young kid. My dog's name was Freddy. My dog was horrible. I was like, why did they make a movie about my dog? So I watched it. It scared the crap out of me. Couldn't sleep that night. My mom wanted to know why. I told her. She said, are you getting interested in this? Yeah, sure, why not? At 10 years old, my mom sat me down in front of the TV, 32-inch old school TV, turned off the lights, put a small bowl of popcorn in front of me, and hit play on the VCR. What movie did she show me that scared the living daylights out of me? That made me want to sleep with my light on in my room for a week? The original black and white Night of the Living Dead. She got to experience Poltergeist, and she did the same thing I want to do for my children. She showed me a movie that really exemplifies what the genre is. She showed me a horror movie at 10 years old that affected me. And I want to do that for my children. I want them to experience a real horror movie when they get older. And I don't want to have to explain them why there's a Jaws 19 and why the shark still looks fake. I don't want to have to explain why there's a Paranormal Activity 30. It's bad enough when I tell them about Friday the 13th, why there was 10 of them. I want that ratio of newer horror movies on those lists during October to have an equal amount, or even an overwhelming amount, of newer horror movies and stories. Bring back the genre that sparked fear and imagination in our generation and generations before us. I miss the scares, and I miss the tension. Don't let this genre die. This is a part of movie history. And you can be a part of it by experiencing what true horror really is. But that's it for me for right now. Thanks for listening, everyone. My name, once again, is Cole Spire. And if you liked what I had to say, hit that like button and subscribe. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter with the links in the low bar. If you didn't like what I had to say, or you disagree with my opinions on the subject, or you have something to say about the movies, let me know below in the comments. Share me around. And as always, have a good night, everybody. And have a happy and safe Halloween.